Hello and welcome back to the story behind the story. I am with Ms. Vivianne. Welcome.
Hi.
All right, I'm going to have you just introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So, hi, everybody. I'm Vivianne Winters Israel and doing a couple of things. I'm penning four children's series, starting with middle grade, then tween, then young adult, and then new adult. Um, Stories to help kids work through today's increased social emotional challenges without being preachy or teachy, but writing and stories that kids really like. But interesting thing about doing stuff for kids is you don't market for kids because they don't buy things. You need a different market of adults. My target market is teachers. But in the process of finding out what teachers needed most for the teacher parent resource guides, I ended up needing to do something else for the teachers directly. And that is part of the process with when I needed to reach out to Wendy for some speaking. And what she ended up doing was perfect for what I had to do. So that's enough intro of me.
That's never enough. It's fine. Vivianne, so interestingly, of course, obviously you worked with me prior to When Stories, but
Yes,
When Stories is a different monster altogether, right? This is the personal stories leading into what we do. So, do you
exactly.
want, yeah. So, can you walk me through a little bit of like when you heard about When Stories, like what made you say yes to it?
Well, when I heard about it, it was when I was working with you because I was doing my a first speaking thing in another
Yeah.
capacity, not stage speaking, but like podcasting and hoping to do some stage speaking. Um, and when you told me about it, one, in the way you framed it, it was like if TEDx and Chicken Soup for the Soul had a baby, it would be When Stories. And if you have a business or what it is that you're doing is heart and or soul sourced, that's a no-brainer. That's just perfectly amazing. One, we need to have some credibility, particularly if we're new. Now, I've published in the past, but that was all nonfiction. This is children's fiction. It's a whole different animal. And then
Hmm.
there's that second business piece, which is for the teachers and directly, and that's separate yet aligned. How is anybody going to understand that? They wouldn't unless they understood why I'm doing it. And When
Right.
Stories is the ignition fire of what catalyzed what becomes a why. So it's like it was an instant no brainer. And
Awesome. I love that.
an instant no brainer. And a thing with now, I had done a compilation book before, which did offer podcast and the speaking, but that was virtual. Virtual and stage are totally different. And I
Hmm.
had myself convinced because you're the first one. I got to be OG Space Monkey in the first one, and it was in November, which for me is NaNoWriMo month, National Novel Writing Month, and I'm already away a week for Thanksgiving, so I can't fly and do this on stage. I've got to do it virtually. And then it's like, well, hmm, no, I have to go. One of my personal goals was to be able to do a from stage speaking, my first, before the end of the year. Well, November's very close to the end of the year. One hadn't happened yet. And it's
Right.
like, I'm just going to make my NaNoWriMo. I'll pick my month and I'll just do that on my own. I'm going to go. So I called Benny and said, yes, I'm doing it and I'm coming in person. And I am so glad I did because it is so different than virtual. And there's so much great support from everyone and your when buddies that you meet there become like your new little family. So it
Hmm.
was it was the best possible way to do a first stage piece or even an early stage piece or a stage piece in something that's new to you, which the fiction writing is for me because it was years
Right.
ago that I did the other publishing.
Well, and I think because you and Nick both flew in, even though originally you both were going to do virtual,
Yeah.
that changed honestly the course of When Stories because
Mm.
after you guys were willing to travel in, I'm like, I'm not going to offer virtual because I felt too you need to be on the stage in person. So we don't even offer virtual anymore. Besides, like when you first signed up. So and because you made that decision, because Nick made that decision, I realized, yeah, virtual is not gonna do the same thing as in person is,
It
so
really
you
it
guys were the
doesn't.
trailblazers.
it doesn't, and I had done a virtual one, and that was it was great, but it is not the same, and
Right.
I'm glad to hear that you're not offering it because that's a whole lot of extra work for you. I mean,
Yeah.
that could possibly take away from something else, but it's a whole lot of extra work, and it doesn't serve the person as well. I mean, even when it's hard,
Right.
because it was hard for me to go. It's hard for me to arrange and put that
Yep.
extra finance stuff out at that piece of time, but I am so glad I did it, and having rehearsal was amazing. It was totally unnerving, but then we had already done our little unnerving piece before we actually did it. And then
Yep.
there's this very magical kind of thing that happens when you get out there. Now I was scared spitless, but once I got out there, something else started taking over, and it was very interesting. But you're not going to know that unless you go do it.
Yeah, and honestly, even like the visuals of being on the stage as opposed to virtual, it's apples to oranges, right? So I'm like
Yes.
in person on that big beautiful stage that you were on, it I don't know, it just shows up so much differently than just sitting on a virtual screen, you know?
Absolutely. Well, there's a dimensionality to you. You're
Right.
actually moving through real space because I see you there.
Yep.
And it calls something different from you. I mean, I had done a little small collection of podcasts
Right.
before, and then that one virtual summit, but it truly calls something different for you. Not to mention, you have those amazing shots from behind people's heads looking at you on the stage. Now, you know, that's oozing credibility. Yay.
Right? That's the goal, right? I love it.
Exactly, because that's really what you need. But the way what wind stories are and how they're sourced from, it really brings people into the core of you. And
Right.
since know, like, and trust is so important for people who don't know you from squat, it's it's a better avenue to that. They can see you right away. Oh,
Right.
now I understand why she's doing it. Well, it's kind of weird she's doing those two things. Oh, I see why that's happening.
Mhm.
Now that makes
Yeah.
sense. Now that's such a different connectivity than from a different space of just speaking about your business, not from, pushy, pushy, but just speaking about it and, why you like what you do. But this is different. This is totally sourced differently. So it attracts
Right.
different people, but it reaches who it needs to reach very differently.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the other part of that is you mentioned like your speaking buddies, right? The community that builds around it. So coming in person, like meeting everybody in person, there's just a different feeling than being on, little screens like we're the Brady Bunch, you know?
Right. And we
Yeah,
did do
it's
our
just a
Brady
different.
Bunch thing, when you were helping coach us through different aspects of stuff. So we did have a a knowing of each other, a
Mhm.
sensing of each other, but that also amplified once we were there in person. It's like, well, oh, I know who you are. Oh, now I really know who you are.
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
was great. Well, and one for us, we got to see how crazy tall Glenn is. I mean, he's a massive human.
Right?
Can't see
Yeah,
that on the
exactly.
screen.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the coaching process, right? Because everyone kind of comes in, they know their one moment, but then I
Mhm.
make you dig a little deeper. Did
Oh,
you have any
yes.
kind of aha moments
Yes.
around in the coaching? What was that like for you?
Oh, well, I had a couple of big ahas, one particularly juicy one. One, I felt I knew why I was doing this, and I knew that this visceral response I had had to this newscast that sparked everything. But Wendy is saying, you know, you're telling me, and I get that you had this response, but what you're telling me is not that. You need to look deeper than that. And I'm thinking, well, well, okay. And sure enough, yes, there was something rather large and deeper, and I had not known that. Wendy has a way of getting this stuff, seeing this stuff, if through what you say and how you respond to stuff that we don't get. And that made an enormous difference. It changed um, some of what I needed to say to let them know a deeper aspect of the why, that the why was really old and really deep. And
Right.
it makes a difference. And
Yeah,
interestingly
and
enough, that's a little piece that I tripped up on because it was harder to let go of.
Right. And it's good because even moving forward for yourself, I want people to know more the deeper reasons why, because
Mm.
that's who you are. That's why this is storytelling and we're not giving a
Yes.
talk. We're telling our stories. So who you were and who you're becoming are they're all tied together in my eyes.
Yes, they're
So I
all tied together, but sometimes we don't readily know all of the source
right,
of it, and you see that stuff, and that happened with many people. So,
right.
yes, so that's a superpower that you're not gonna find with everybody.
And I always relate that to songwriting because I can find a hook, and I can
Yeah,
kind of search a little deeper because of that's how my brain works.
yeah.
So I feel like it's just kind of that weird gift that really plays well with one's stories,
Yes,
you know?
absolutely. It
Yeah,
absolutely does. And when we know, once you help us see, for those of us that didn't see it already, that deeper sourcing of
right.
what launched us, that adds to our own commitment of our stuff, our own um, confidence pusher that we have to do this.
Yeah,
This is something that needs to be done, and we are the ones that have to do it. So
yeah,
that empowers us differently through our businesses and our relatedness to our clients moving forward.
yeah. And someone mentioned today on because I'm working with the next group going through the process,
Yes.
they said there's a therapeutic nature to the coaching, which was
Yes.
not even, like, intentional. It just happens,
Well, that's
that
I think part of because of how you see what you see and how it
right.
it changes how we present, then absolutely, yes. Because,
Yeah,
there were some emotions happening, and there's a reason for that,
yeah,
but it also serves what we need to do.
yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this. So if somebody was kind of on the fence, right? They're looking at one stories, they're thinking about it, but they're not sure. I mean, I know you were kind of a quick yes, but for
Mhm.
somebody else who's like, I've got this story, but it's really personal, and it ties to my business, what would you say to them to encourage them to share it? Was there something for you after the fact that you're like, gosh, I'm so glad I did that?
Oh, yes, and actually some of that happened during the speaking, even though I was nervous. I could feel that this needed to come out. Even like I mentioned, like there was something like a sentence. It wasn't necessarily mean anything to anybody else, but
Right.
for me, I wanted that for just a little connection flow. But I could feel that did need to come out. And after I got through that little like few second piece, it's like, oh my gosh, yes, and things started flowing more easily from me, and afterwards, instead of, thinking, "Oh, wow, I got through it. I'm still alive." It was like, "Ah," it was like, this is amazing space. And it's
Yeah.
like, "Yes, I am so glad I did this." And so be on the fence about it. This is really I mean, there's many things that people say, "Oh, you need to do this and you need to do that." And sure, there are a lot of things that are important to do, but some things are more seminal in or I can't think of another word. It's more core to what is really going to move and drive things forward. One, you have the chapter, and that's where people can read if they didn't get to see the you on stage or the off YouTube. If they find the book first, then they can look at your other stuff of you later. But there is that. It's a credibility piece that you have to present for wherever you go, or I'm in this book. So that's a major credibility thing on its own. The stage speaking versus virtual speaking is huge, actually, over virtual speaking. Now I can say that having done both. Um, and the podcast, it may be your first one. I was very early in it. I just happened to have a few. But if you
Right.
haven't had one yet, it's much easier for someone to agree to interview on your podcast. They say, well, somebody else has already done this, and check that out. Well, that went well. Okay, good. It ties so many things together, but because of its nature different than another platform that might offer you the three things, how it offers you from the source, both for your own, as you mentioned, therapeutic, and yes, I will amen to that, um, component. You're going to reach people differently than some of the other stuff you do. If you do this, it is like your major kickstart.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think what's interesting too is what's kind of happened naturally is on the stage, you have your talk, you do your talk, but then the book, a lot of times, you all get to add a little different spice to it or add things to
Yes.
the story there. So
Mhm.
so you could watch the talk, but then you could read the book and be like, "Oh my gosh, like there was this added bit here and there." And then the podcast has an interview, right? So everyone got
Mhm.
interviewed before their talk. So each one has its own special kind of special sauce, I would say, even,
Yes.
so you could listen to all 3 and still get something out of all of them. So that's
Oh,
kind of the
absolutely.
goal. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, the speech and well, as you mentioned when I was learning from you just before I learned about twin stories, is that giving a talk is different than writing something. It has to be much
Yeah.
more concise and has to have different pacing and stuff to it. So there's more. It's well, like a movie between the movie and the book.
Right.
Movie is great, it moves, but there's more. But wait, there's
Right.
more, and it's in the book, it's in the writing. And then, but
Yeah.
that's not the back and forth which you get with the interview. So yes, they're
Right.
all important, but this platform over some others, I think, has the kernel piece of what you truly need and what will make the largest difference for what you're trying to bring out to the world. And that
Yeah.
tough, deep thing that you share is going to be the thing that somebody or many bodies need. And if you
Yeah.
didn't
Awesome.
dig for it, if Wendy didn't dig and see it in you, then it would be a missing. So you would be without that, and you're better with it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. So, okay, so obviously if people definitely go and watch Vivianne's story on the YouTube channel, you'll see her whole talk out there and you'll learn more about what she does and why and these modalities that she teaches. So I want you to make sure you go out and watch that for sure. But Vivianne, how can people get a hold of you? So obviously, whether they want to learn more about your books, about the modalities that you teach, what's a great way for someone to connect with you?
Well, the easiest way to tell you would be my website, which is vivwi.me. That's the short version because my name is too long and so easily misspelled. Um, but there you can find the two compilation books I have done, my twin stories, and another one, and the um, first series that will be coming out soon, some information about that, and there's more story there in the blog about what launched all this stuff.
Right. Oh, I love
So
that.
that's the
Yeah.
best place to find.
Good.
And
Yeah,
my
definitely go out to the website and check it out and watch for the book. I'm excited for your books to come out, so
thank you.
make sure you tell me, like, when do you go out there and get my books?
I
Because
will.
I wanna know.
I
So, well,
will.
thank you so much for coming on and sharing and for being part of the One Stories, legacy. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you tremendously, and I am so glad you created this. And actually, part of why I went stories was another reason it was such an easy for me is that I was so impressed by that you were going to do this that I wanted to support you in birthing it and creating it
Aw.
because it was such the blend of TEDx and chicken soup for the soul. I mean, that's just too awesome. I can't wait to see how this grows.
No, I
And
appreciate
it's
that, and
already been growing like craziness.
well, what's funny too is that I found out there's another platform similar that has compared Chicken Soup for the Soul for TEDx, so I'm not making sure I'm not telling people that anymore.
Oh my
I didn't
gosh.
know.
Okay. Sorry.
No, no, it's okay. I didn't realize that there was somebody else is like, "Hey, I thought somebody else uses that." I'm like, "Oh, I did not know." So
Really
once they
good.
pointed me to it, so I'm like, "That's okay. We're our own thing."
We're our own thing, and they don't have Wendy's superpower. So
There you go.
there's
They don't
that.
got the superpower. But thank